tabs. And the third type of authentication here, we're going to specify with the command login, and then as you can see here, local. And this is going to be for local password checking. Again, what we're going to do here is once someone tries to telnet into us from a different router or switch or device, we're going to be checking our local router for the username and password authentication credentials. So with this option, we can build a user database here. If we go back to, if we hit enter there and specify login local, then we'll go back into global config. We can go ahead and put in some username as username Bob, and then we can follow up with the password of something like tree, then hit enter. So now from router 1, if I go ahead and try to telnet in to router 2, you can see here now it's asking me for a username. So if I go ahead in here and just put in Bob, and if I put in my password as tree, as you can see here now I have access into router 2. So again, that's how to configure how to configure your router to check its local user database for authentication credentials with Telnet. So again, you can have multiple users this way. So we can put in another username, put in Katie, and password is Apple. So now if I go from router 1 and telnet in to router 2, you can see here it's going to ask me for username. I put in Katie, and then password Apple. Now you can see here I have access to router 2. So this is a way to have multiple user accounts where they can have, a unique username, and then we can give them all different passwords based on their authentication credentials. So now if I go ahead and from router 2, if I do show users, you can see here that I see the username, the user Katie is in the router. So as you can see here, if I do a show run, now we can see in our database, we should be able to see our usernames and our passwords for our users in the running configuration of our routers, of router 2. And we can see that here, username Bob and username Katie. And we can see they both have their passwords here in plain text, so anybody, if they're walking by and look over and see this, they can get in to this router using their credentials. Also, if you give somebody like the running configuration of the router and you haven't changed the configuration to take out the users, then you have just pretty much given them access into the router with these people's user credentials. So what we can do to mask these passwords is the command from global configuration. If we do a service and then do a password encryption command, what this will do is encrypt our passwords in running configuration. So now if I do a show run on router 2, what we can see here now, all we see is a bunch of letters and numbers whereas before we could see their passwords were in plain text and easily readable. Okay, so that is it. That is our basic system management lab where we went over how to set up Telnet on router 2. We looked at 3 types of access via Telnet. We looked at the first one, which was where we had basically no password authentication, which was the most dangerous and probably the worst type of authentication that you can have on your VTY lines on your router. Then we looked at the second option, which was assigning a default, pretty much a global password for all users that were telnetting in to our VTY lines on our router. And then the third option here is where we went ahead in to global configuration mode. We created users and we assigned them unique passwords, and then we went under the VTY lines and we put in the command login local, and with that command what that allowed us the router to do is every time someone tried to telnet in, they had to put in a unique username and password, and that had to match what we had in our router's local database. And if that indeed did match, then we were able to access our telnet into the router. And then the last option which we had here, which was a more of a security feature, was to put in the command service password encryption in global configuration mode. And what that allowed us to do is it allowed us to hide the passwords that were in plain text, that showed up in plain text in the running configuration mode of the router. So again, I'd like to thank you guys for watching this video, and I'd hope you'll be with me with the next one. Thanks.